The rain had been relentless that morning in Quantico, Virginia. A gray mist clung to the trees like a secret, and the streets shimmered under the weight of a storm that refused to pass. Special Agent Jordan Blake, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving the unsolvable, sipped his black coffee as he stared at the blinking cursor on his laptop. He hadn't slept in 2 days, not since the call came in from D.C. A high-profile tech CEO, Elliot Granger, had been found dead in his penthouse office, an apparent suicide. But something didn't sit right. The man was on the verge of launching a revolutionary cybersecurity platform that promised to make government systems virtually impenetrable. His death, just days before the launch, raised more than eyebrows. It triggered alarms. Blake was assigned to the case not because it was routine, but because it wasn't. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime on the 47th floor of the Granger Tower. Blake stepped out, flanked by forensic analyst Maya Chen and rookie agent Leo Ramirez. The hallway was pristine, glass walls, modern art, and silence that felt too deliberate. Inside the office, Elliot Granger's body lay slumped over his desk. A single gunshot wound to the temple. The weapon, a sleek, unregistered Glock, was still in his hand. The windows behind him framed the Capitol in the distance, as if mocking the very institutions he had vowed to protect. But Blake's eyes weren't on the body. They were on the details. The coffee cup on the desk was untouched. The security footage from the hallway had a 17-minute gap. The biometric lock on the office door had been overridden, by someone with admin-level clearance. Maya knelt beside the body, scanning for trace evidence. "No powder burns," she murmured. "If he shot himself, there should be residue. But his hands are clean." Leo looked pale. "So it was staged?" Blake didn't answer. He walked to the desk, opened the top drawer, and found a flash drive labeled Echo Protocol. He pocketed it silently. Then he turned to the wall-mounted screen. It was still on, displaying a message: "You can't protect what you don't understand." Blake's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a murder. It was a message. As the team began their sweep, Blake stepped out onto the balcony. The wind tugged at his coat. Somewhere below, the city buzzed with its usual chaos, unaware that something far more dangerous than a murder had just occurred. He knew this case wouldn't be solved with fingerprints or ballistics. It would require decoding secrets, navigating betrayal, and confronting enemies who didn't wear masks, they wore suits. And it had just begun. The flash drive labeled Echo Protocol sat on Agent Jordan Blake's desk like a ticking bomb. He hadn't slept since retrieving it from Elliot Granger's office. Something about the message on the screen, "You can't protect what you don't understand," kept echoing in his mind. He inserted the drive into a secure FBI terminal. The contents were encrypted, but not beyond reach. Within minutes, Maya Chen had cracked the first layer. What they found wasn't just sensitive, it was explosive. A folder titled GhostNet contained surveillance logs, intercepted communications, and a list of names, government officials, defense contractors, and tech executives. All marked with a single word: compromised. Blake leaned back, eyes narrowing. This isn't just a murder. It's a breach. The first lead. Among the files was a time-stamped video, grainy, but clear enough. It showed Elliot in a heated argument with a man whose face was partially obscured. Audio was distorted, but one phrase stood out: "If you go public, you'll be signing your death warrant." Maya ran facial recognition. The match came back: Dr. Adrian Voss, a cybersecurity consultant with ties to the Department of Defense. Voss had once worked with Granger on a classified project called EchoNet, designed to detect cyber threats before they occurred. Blake paid Voss a visit. The consultant's home was a fortress, gated, guarded, and cold. Voss greeted him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I heard about Elliot," he said, pouring whiskey. "Tragic." Blake didn't sit. "You threatened him." Voss chuckled. "We disagreed. That's not a crime. But murder is." Voss leaned in. You're chasing shadows, Agent. Elliot had enemies. I'm just one of many. Blake left with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear, Voss was hiding something. The hacker's trail. Back at HQ, Maya traced the breach in Granger's office security system. The override had come from an external IP, masked through 7 proxies, but eventually leading to a known alias, Nix, a notorious hacker for hire. Blake had crossed paths with Nix before. She was brilliant, unpredictable, and always 2 steps ahead. He reached out through a secure channel. Hours later, a message appeared on his screen, "You're late, Agent. The game's already begun." Attached was a file, a blueprint of Granger Tower's security system, modified. Someone had tampered with the biometric locks weeks before the murder. Nix's note ended with a chilling line, "You're not chasing a killer. You're chasing a system." Internal pressure. As Blake dug deeper, pressure mounted. His supervisor, Deputy Director Karen Holt, called him in. "You're making waves, Jordan. The Bureau's getting calls from the Pentagon." Blake didn't flinch. "Then we're close." Holt sighed. "You've got 72 hours. After that, this case goes cold." Blake knew what that meant. Someone wanted the investigation buried. Just as the team began connecting dots, another body surfaced, Senator Marcus Ellison, found dead in his Georgetown home. Cause of death, apparent heart failure. But Maya's analysis revealed traces of a rare neurotoxin, undetectable without advanced screening. Ellison's name had appeared on Granger's list. He was compromised. Blake stared at the evidence. They're cleaning house. The breakthrough. Leo Ramirez, the rookie agent, uncovered a hidden subfolder on the flash drive. Inside was a single document, Project EchoNet, Phase 2. It detailed a plan to install surveillance software across federal systems, without oversight. Granger had discovered the plan and tried to expose it. That's why he was silenced. Blake's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, "Meet me at Lincoln Memorial. Midnight. Come alone." The meeting. The night was quiet, the monument bathed in pale light. Blake approached cautiously. A figure stepped from the shadows, hooded, voice disguised. "I worked with Elliot," the figure said. "He found out EchoNet was being hijacked. Not to protect, but to control." "Who's behind it?" Blake asked. The figure hesitated. "It goes deep. Voss is just a pawn. The real architect is inside your agency." Before Blake could ask more, the figure vanished into the night. Back at HQ, Blake reviewed everything. The flash drive, the deaths, the surveillance logs, they all pointed to a conspiracy that reached into the heart of national security. He turned to Maya. "We're not just solving a murder. We're exposing a coup." She nodded grimly. "And they know we're onto them." The clock was ticking. Enemies were closing in, and the shadows were growing darker. The air inside FBI headquarters felt heavier than usual. Agent Jordan Blake stood alone in the operations room, staring at the digital map projected across the wall. Red dots marked compromised systems. Blue lines traced the flow of data. And in the center, pulsing like a heartbeat, was the name, EchoNet. The anonymous informant's warning echoed in his mind, "The real architect is inside your agency." Blake had 48 hours before the case was shut down. The deeper he dug, the more resistance he faced. Files disappeared. Witnesses went silent. Even Maya Chen, his trusted forensic analyst, had received veiled threats. But Blake wasn't backing down. Blake devised a plan. He would bait the mole, force them to act. He leaked a false report claiming the flash drive had been decrypted and the names of all EchoNet collaborators were being prepared for public release. Within hours, his secure server was breached. But it wasn't subtle. It was rushed. Sloppy. Maya traced the intrusion to an internal terminal, registered to Deputy Director Karen Holt. Blake's blood ran cold. Holt had been his mentor. She'd recruited him, trained him, protected him. Now she was the enemy. Blake was offered a promotion, Deputy Director of Cyber Intelligence. He declined. He didn't want a desk. He wanted distance. A visit to Granger Tower. One rainy afternoon, Blake returned to the place where it had all begun, Granger Tower. The office had been cleared out, the bloodstains scrubbed, the windows polished. But the ghosts remained. He stood by the desk where Elliot had died, staring at the skyline beyond. The city pulsed with life, unaware of how close it had come to losing its freedom. Blake pulled out a small envelope from his coat. Inside was a photo, Elliot Granger and his daughter, smiling on a beach. He placed it gently in the drawer. "You weren't paranoid," Blake whispered. "You were right." Reflection, the cost of truth. Back at his apartment, Blake sat by the window, watching the rain trace patterns down the glass. Maya Chen had stopped by earlier, dropping off a box of case files marked, "Closed." But Blake knew better. Cases like these were never truly closed. He opened his journal, a habit he'd picked up during his early days in the bureau. The pages were filled with notes, sketches, fragments of thought. He began to write, "Truth is not a destination. It's a war. Every lie we expose births another. Every enemy we defeat leaves behind a shadow. And every victory comes with a cost. Underscore." He paused, staring at the words. "I've seen good men fall. I've seen justice twisted. But I've also seen courage, in the eyes of those who refuse to look away." Underscore. A conversation with Maya. Later that evening, Maya returned. She brought coffee and silence, two things Blake appreciated more than most. They sat on the balcony, watching the city breathe. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. Blake nodded. "Every day." "Then why stay?" He looked at her. "Because someone has to." She smiled. "You sound like Elliot." Blake chuckled. "He was smarter than me." "No," she said. "He was louder. You're quieter. But you listen better." They sat in silence for a while, the hum of traffic below like a distant heartbeat. A week later, Blake received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You exposed one system. But there are others. EchoNet was just the beginning. If you want to know more, follow the trail. Start with Project Helix." Underscore. Blake folded the letter carefully, placed it in his journal, and stared out the window. The war wasn't over. In the end, Echoes of Deceit wasn't just a case. It was a revelation. A reminder that corruption doesn't always wear a mask, it often wears a badge. That truth isn't always welcomed, it's feared. And that justice isn't a clean victory, it's a messy, painful pursuit. Jordan Blake didn't become a hero. He became a witness. A guardian of the line between order and chaos. And as long as the shadows whispered, he would listen. Because someone had to. Agent Jordan Blake had uncovered the truth, but truth, he learned, was never clean. It came wrapped in betrayal, soaked in sacrifice, and left behind a trail of broken trust. The EchoNet conspiracy had been dismantled, but the scars it left on the Bureau, the nation, and Blake himself were permanent. He didn't see himself as a hero. Heroes wore capes in comic books. In reality, they wore bulletproof vests and carried burdens no one else could see. Blake had lost friends, mentors, and a piece of his own faith in the system. But he had gained clarity. Justice wasn't a destination, it was a direction. In the quiet moments after the storm, Blake understood something deeper: the enemy isn't always outside the walls. Sometimes, it's the silence within. Sometimes, it's the compromise we justify. The secrets we bury. The truths we delay. He had stared into the abyss, and chosen not to blink. Blake didn't take the promotion. Instead, he transferred to a smaller field office, far from DC where the noise was less political and more personal. He began mentoring young agents, teaching them not just how to chase criminals, but how to chase truth. Maya Chen continued her work in forensic intelligence, and their friendship remained a quiet anchor in the chaos. Occasionally, they'd meet for coffee, talk about old cases, and wonder what new shadows were forming. Because they knew, the echoes of deceit never truly fade. They just change frequency.